But just before we begin, I picked the topic of freedom today because this becomes really the theme of the next Jewish festival, the festival of Passover, which is coming up really, think about this, in just about 3 weeks. And it is the festival that celebrates freedom. The Jewish people finally, after 210 years of slavery, coming out of Egypt into freedom. The big question is, of course, how do you define freedom? And what are the steps to freedom, if there are any? That question and these steps we'll explore in today's class with the references. But before I share my screen, I just want to clarify what freedom means from a Jewish perspective. Because it's interesting to note that the word for freedom in Judaism, think about this, one of the words for freedom in Judaism is chofesh. Now, that's spelled chet peshin. Chofesh means something else in Judaism. What does it mean? If you change the vowels around, you still keep the same letters with the same order, but you change the vowels around. Chofesh can be also pronounced chapes, which really means to search. So the word for freedom is the same word as the word to search in Hebrew. Why? And that is maybe to indicate that the only way to attain freedom is if we search within ourselves. Freedom is not a blessing from the outside. It's rather a blessing from the inside. You can be in jail and still be free if you can release that which is inside. And you can be outside of jail and be in prison, in a spiritual, in a psychological prison, because you haven't released that which is within. What is it that needs to be released from within? And that, I believe, is the soul. The more we search, the more we search for that soul, the more we search for our God-given purpose in this world, the more we search for our unique role to play in life, and the more we can exercise it and actualize it, then the freer we will be. So that's really the big idea of freedom. Now, yes, there are steps to freedom according to Judaism, and these steps, by the way, were laid out by God Himself when He freed the Jewish people out of Egypt. And those are the steps that I want to explore here with the screen, with the shared screen and the references right here. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So when God decided to finally redeem or liberate the Jewish people from 210 horrendous years of slavery in Egypt, and we won't go into all of the torture, really all of the subhuman conditions that they were in, all of the genocide of drowning all of the baby boys, as we all know, all of the suffering that they had to go through for 210 years. But finally, God decided to redeem them. He sent Moses to be the leader and to make his case in front of Pharaoh. And finally, as we all know, after 10 plagues, the Jewish people were redeemed. But when he decided to liberate them, he used, in the words of the verse in Exodus right here, he used 4 languages of redemption. Now, by the way, these 4 languages of redemption is the reason why we have 4 cups of wine in the Passover Seder. That's why you find the number 4 as a prevalent number in the Passover Seder. For example, 4 cups of wine, as mentioned, 4 questions, manishtana, right? You have also, 4 different matzahs. So you have 3 matzahs plus 1 at the very end. You have the number 4 that's quite dominant in the Passover Seder. All of these number 4s are essentially rooted in this idea that God used 4 languages of redemption to liberate the Jewish people. And by using these 4 languages of redemption, God was telling us that for us too, today, even though we may not be in Egypt, for us too, in order to liberate ourselves, to feel free, not just physically, of course. And I think, thank God, we live in a country where we can all be free physically, but to feel free also spiritually speaking, psychologically speaking, emotionally speaking, then we too need to implement these 4 steps, these 4 languages of freedom, and then we'll be able to attain complete freedom. What are these 4 languages? The first one is, I will bring you out. God said to the Jewish people, therefore said to the Israelites, this is God speaking to Moses, Exodus 6:6-7, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. That's language 1. Language 2, I will save you. Language 3, I will redeem you. And language 4, I will take you as my own people. So language one, let's go directly to I will bring you out. What step is this really referring to? What does it mean that God will bring us out? What type of liberation is he really alluding to when he says that he'll bring us out? And I think for that, we need to understand what happened to the Jewish people and the commandment that they received just before coming out of Egypt. Because I think that this language of I will bring you out refers to specifically this episode of what happened just before they came out. That was really their first step to freedom. That was them being brought out of their own mental, psychological prison. What exactly happened? Exodus 8:21 tells us that on the 10th of Nisan, on the 10th of this month, God instructed Moses to tell every Jew, and this is basically what the reference is saying, that they should, every family, every Jewish family, that they should bring into their home a lamb, keep it in their home, tie it to their beds for 3 days. And after 3 days, they should sacrifice that lamb. And that became really the Paschal lamb as we know it today. Now, with the blood of that sacrifice, they would then have to smear their doors. And then when God carried out the 10th plague, and the angel of death had to come into the homes to carry out the plague of the firstborn and kill all of the Egyptian firstborns, he would know that the homes that have blood smeared on their doorpost are Jewish homes, and therefore they should be spared. The homes that did not have that blood are Egyptian homes, and that's where this 10th plague should be carried out. That's what they did with the blood of the sacrifice. But I want to go to the very idea of bringing a lamb. Imagine this, put yourselves in their shoes. You are living as a slave now for so many years. God tells you to bring a lamb and keep it, tie it to your bed for 3 days and then sacrifice it. Just imagine the scene. But imagine something more. And that is that keep in mind that the lamb is one of the great gods of the Egyptians. And if you take their lamb, they'll be mad at you. How dare you touch their God? Think about this. Now, you're a slave, which also means probably that you're thinking like a slave, which means that you feel like a victim. Would you, and I ask you today, would you dare carry out this commandment by God, risking maybe your life? Because as mentioned, you're taking their God, and your masters might be so mad that they might just kill you. How dare you touch our God? Would you carry this commandment out? And what's amazing is that the Jews listened to God and they abided. There was not one exception. Every single Jew said to God, yes, we understand the risk that we're taking, but we are going to fulfill this commandment. We're going to take a lamb. Now, God asked them to keep this lamb for 3 days, which means really that they were putting themselves in danger for 3 days. It wasn't just, a quick moment that in which they were in danger. 3 days, 3 days in which their masters could come to them and say, hey, I see you have a lamb at the bed of your home. How dare you? This is our God. Let's kill you. But they were willing to persevere for 3 days, take that immense risk, and show their complete commitment to God. When God saw that, he said, okay, this is now a nation that deserves to be free, because it's a nation that has showed its heart and how free it is. And if I see a person with a free heart, then he deserves freedom. He's able to commit himself to me, to God, to all that is meaningful and good in life, in spite of the danger. That person deserves freedom. And this is what the Orach Chaim here, one of the great halachic authorities of the 15th century, mentions, that the Jewish nation should have expected a mass pogrom, attacking and stoning the Jews. Yet the Egyptians watched this happen and they kept silent. Hence, to commemorate this extraordinary event, we call the Shabbat the Great Shabbat. The Shabbat before Passover is called the Great Shabbat to commemorate this extraordinary event. But indeed, they should have expected a mass pogrom, but nothing happened. And that is considered to be one of the greatest miracles of the story of the Grand Exodus. Not so much that God came from without and showered plagues on the Egyptians. Not so much that he came and made the sea split, for example. But rather the great miracle was that the Jewish people find within themselves the courage, the determination, the conviction to commit themselves to God and to finally be free from within. When God saw that, he said, okay, now you deserve this great miracle. Now you deserve freedom. And I think this first step to freedom is actually one of the most important ones, and maybe one of the most relevant ones now day and age. Because very often, yes, we are, thank God, physically free. But when is it that we find within ourselves the courage to do that which is right, even though people might not agree with it? When is it that we find within ourselves the courage to say what is right and to stand up for the truth, even though it may not be popular? I don't know if it's that often. And yet God tells us, well, if you really wish to become free, then you first have to be anchored in principles that are divine. You first have to be steeped in roots that are roots of truth. And then if you can find that courage to actualize that truth, then you'll be free. Then at least you'll have progressed forward with that first crucial step of freedom. I want to share just a quick story about Rabbi Twersky, by Dr. Abraham J. Twersky, who passed away about a month ago, really one of the great luminaries of our generation, who wrote many, many books on addiction. He was one of the experts of that field. He had a rehab center, in fact, in Pittsburgh that saved countless people from all walks of life, from all sorts of addictions, including, by the way, superstars in Hollywood and in the sports world and so on. But he was a man who was deeply Hasidic. He was, speaking of being anchored in your heritage, he was as anchored as could be. In fact, he would walk around with his long black garb, and he had a big white beard, and he wore a strimal on Shabbat and a black hat and a payas sometimes. And he was a man who appeared also as Hasidic as could be. And there's a great story, and I may have shared it in the past, but in his loving memory, I'd like to share it again. There's a great story about Rabbi Twersky and how he was once traveling on a plane. And then this Jew comes to him and says to him, how dare you dress up like this? It's enough, you ultra-Orthodox Jews. It's time to grow up, adapt to the modern times, get rid of these horrific, horrendous clothes. Just step up to your game. We live in modern times. It's enough. Change your habits, change your behaviors, change your clothing. And Rabbi Twersky decided to play a little trick on him. It's very witty. And he says to this man, he says, I fail to understand your verbiage. I'm Amish. I don't know what you want from me. And the man, this Jewish man, then all of a sudden was taken aback, and he says to Rabbi Twersky, oh, I'm so sorry. I have nothing but respect for the Amish people. I'll leave you alone, I'm sorry. And then it was Rabbi Twersky's turn. And he said to him, oh, so if I was Amish, you have nothing but respect. But if I'm Jewish, then you have nothing but disrespect for me. It's about time Jews like you learn to respect who they are. Because only once you will respect who you are, then the people of the world will be able to respect you. If you disrespect who you are, people of the world will disrespect you too. It's true. By the way, psychologically, it was no psychologist, it was a psychologist for many reasons, but maybe for that too, to explain to the world that if we do not respect ourselves as we are, for who we are, for what we stand for, then the world won't respect us, whether it's being Jewish or whether it's being, dignified human beings or whatever it may be. But if we don't respect ourselves, then the world won't respect us. If we respect ourselves, our deeper self, then the world will learn to respect us too. Now, I think this goes back to exactly this first language of redemption, where God was telling the Jewish people, start respecting yourselves. If you can respect yourselves and who you are, people that are committed to God and his commandments, then the world, then the Egyptians will start respecting you. Then you'll break that barrier. And then eventually you'll be able to merit this great freedom. By the way, when they did respect who they were, when they showed that level of respect and level of commitment, the Egyptians kept silent. Yes, a mass pogrom, as mentioned, was expected, but they had to respect them. And therefore they kept silent, because again, those who respect themselves are respected by others. That's idea number one, step number one, expressed again by language number one, the language of I will bring you out. Language number two of redemption, of this freedom, is I will save you. What does this refer to? So I want to go to one of the customs that we perform just on the eve of Passover. And that custom is that we take a candle and a spoon and a feather, and we search our home. I know many of you are familiar with this custom. We search our home for chametz, for leavened bread or any crumbs. And if we find any, then we gather them with a feather, put them in a spoon, put them in a bag, and then the next day we burn the chametz and the spoon and the feather and the candle that helped us burn this, find these crumbs. Now, the question is asked, why should we burn this candle? The feather I can understand because it touched the crumbs. The spoon also, we gathered the crumbs with it. But the candle didn't touch any. The candle is not chametz. It's not contaminated by leavened bread. So why burn the candle? And the answer that the Kotzker Rebbe would give, and I think it's one of the great ideas of Judaism, is that, let's think about this. This candle was used for what purpose? To search for negativity, to search for that which is prohibited. So to search for negativity. That type of light is not a light we want in our world. Lights that only search for negativity should be burned too, because it's not the type of vision we want in life. In life, we should be people who always search for positivity, not negativity. People that search for the good in others, not the bad in others. People that search for the blessing even within the curse, not the curse itself. That's the eyesight, so to speak, that Judaism wants us to develop. Thus, we throw away that candle to teach us that any negative vision that we may have in life should also be burned, because we are people of positivity. Someone just told me last week that it's interesting to note, I don't know what to make of this, but I'm going to share this with you anyhow, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe, of course, was one of my great models, maybe one of the great models of Jewish history. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's blood type was B positive. What's your blood type? Mine is O plus. His blood type was B positive. And he shared with me jokingly saying, you see, that was the Rebbe. He was always positive, B positive. So maybe that's why his blood type is like that. Yes, Janet.
I'm B positive.
You be positive. Well, just like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, look at that. And you are positive.
I try.
Well done. I don't know what to make of that, because what if someone is B negative? So maybe he has more work to do. But not that there's any correlation, of course, scientifically, but the idea is a cute idea. And that is that, again, it shares the message that we ought to be positive all the time. You know, one of the great models for that was the Hasidic master, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, some 250 years ago. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was also known as the advocate of Israel, because he always searched for positivity in others. Even though the negativity was so clear, he said, no. He always twisted stories in order to find the positivity in them. You know, the famous story about him is how a Jew once, we may have shared the story before, but it's a cute story and definitely a story with a powerful lesson. Was once, that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was once walking to his synagogue on Yom Kippur. And on the way, he saw a Jew eating in a non-kosher restaurant. So he approaches him and he says to him, well, maybe you don't know that today is Yom Kippur? The Jew says, yes, I know, and I don't care. He says, well, one second, maybe you don't know that this restaurant is not kosher? He says, yes, I know, and I don't care. He says, well, maybe you're eating in a non-kosher restaurant on Yom Kippur because you have to, maybe because you're sick and you need to eat for health reasons. He says, no, Rabbi, I'm completely healthy. You don't understand, I just don't care. And at one point, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev turned his eyes to the heavens and he said, look, God, master of the universe, look how special your people are. No matter how much you push them to the corner, they'll always tell the truth. Now, I'm sure many people who would see a Jew like that eating in a non-kosher restaurant on Yom Kippur would immediately judge him, first of all, and dismiss him. Or again, be negative. But here was a man who, again, modeled and embodied this lesson, that we have to be positive and judge people always favorably, in the words of the ethics of our fathers. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, by the way, was once approached by one of his students who said to him, Rabbi, I have to tell you about the 70-year-old man that you know that was a devout Jew for 70 years. And now I just heard, Rabbi, you won't believe it, but I just heard that he left Judaism altogether. What a shame and what a shanda. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev responded to the student, says, no, actually, I judge this Jew so favorably. Look how special this Jew is. It took 70 years for the evil inclination to finally get to him. But imagine his strength, his resistance for 70 years to overpower the evil inclination. It took him 70 years. So look at his strength rather than look at his weakness. That's really the second message. And I think this is why the second language here is I will save you. What God really is saying, if we go back to the verse right here, is that I will save you from being slaves to them. I will save you from enslaved visions, from visions that are negative, that pull you down. I will save you from those visions, pull you up, if you yourselves can pull yourselves up and be positive. I'm not going to go into the next verses here, but I will go into the third language of redemption. And that is the third step, I will redeem you. So again, to summarize, step number one is to have the courage to own who we are and to stand for principles and for truth and for God. Step number two is to also, as we own ourselves and own who we are and own our identity, remain positive all the time. Step number three here is referring to this taking off, this soaring. Now, as we are being positive, then the only way to fully soar, to fully take off to redemption, to freedom, is to let go of anything that may be holding us down, anything from the past. And maybe this is why it's interesting to note that when God have redeemed the Jewish people beyond what we spoke about, asking them to have to take a lamb and tie it to their beds for 3 days and then sacrifice it, he also asked them something that seems very bizarre, but he asked them here in the words of Exodus that you will plunder the Egyptians. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters. So in other words, he asked them to go into the homes of the Egyptians and take clothing, take money. I don't understand. Is God advocating thievery? Was he asking the Jewish people to become thieves and steal from the Egyptians? Look, read the words, and you will plunder the Egyptians. Really? God is telling the Jews to plunder the Egyptians? Why so? Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen Cook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, gives this commentary, which I think relates again to this third language of redemption. And that is, God wanted the Israelites to leave with a sense that some of the debt had been settled, so that part of the stigma of slavery would be erased, and they could leave without a deep sense of hatred and rage. What does that mean? That means that God wanted the Jews, to feel that they've been paid back, that by taking their silver, their gold, their clothing, they've been paid back for all the 210 years of slavery. Why did he want them to feel that way? So that they wouldn't hold a grudge against the Egyptians. Because God knew that a person who holds a grudge is a person that can never be free, because he's always imprisoned by that grudge. He's always toxified by that grudge. So you can't really be free. So God said, you know what? Go into those homes, take whatever you think you deserve, and then let that grudge go away. And when you'll say goodbye hatred, you'll be able to say hello freedom. And what a powerful statement this is. Because again, referring to this, I will redeem you from those grudges, redeem you from the negativities of the past. Because again, so often we want to embrace the newness of today. We want to embrace the new blessings. Has it ever happened to you that you go to vacation, say, for example, or you even just go on a walk, on a hike, and you try to really release yourself, but you can't. Why? Because you have grudges, or you have baggages of the past that just are not leaving you. So you can be in the freest state of, physical state, but you're in also the most imprisoning psychological state because of these grudges. God understood that. And therefore he said, say goodbye hatred. And only then will you be able to say, hello freedom. I had the privilege of meeting once Steven Spielberg's mother. I'm sure many of you have been there, but she owns a little, I don't know if it's still there. She owns a little kosher restaurant on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. It was called Milky Way, right? I think it's called the Milky Way. And what? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, until very old age, she passed away not too long ago. But until very, very old age, she would be there every day running the restaurant. And when I met her a few years ago, she was 92 years old. And I walk into the restaurant, say hello, we start speaking. She's very proud of her son, of course, Steven Spielberg. She has posters of his movies all across the restaurant, like a good Jewish mother, thinking that her son is God. And I don't blame her. Every Jewish mother's like that. But she was so full of life. So I asked her.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I was just going to say, I was at that restaurant, and his mother used to say, if I knew that my son is going to be so successful, I would have put gold in my uterus. I would have turned it into gold, my uterus.
Okay, very nice. But anyway, so I'm asking her, what's your secret? Like how you so happy, especially at this age, when usually people have lived life and they know a little more about life than others, to know that life is not as smooth sailing as it may be sometimes. So I'm asking her, what's your secret? And she told me two things. She said, number one, I'm in love with life. And she said, number two, I don't keep grudges. And I said to myself, you see, that's a recipe. That's a recipe to really market. To be in love with life. There's so much blessing in life not to be in love with. And in spite of the coronavirus, in spite of the curse, there's so much good. But also, I don't keep grudges. I don't live in the past. And I think that's what God wanted to train the Jewish people, to teach the Jewish people and train them to do before really redeeming them. And that, again, is conveyed with that third language of our redeeming. The fourth language, and the fourth and final language, is I will take you as my own people. Now, if you notice, it's interesting because the Jewish people left Egypt, yet they were still somewhat imprisoned. Why? Because the Egyptians were not chasing them. And on the seventh day, they were facing the sea, and God commanded them, go, move forward. And they moved forward, and the sea split. What's the idea, the mystical, the spiritual, the psychological idea of the sea splitting? I think that idea that we'll talk about just a short moment, but that idea also reveals that fourth step of freedom. If step number one is owning who you are, respecting yourself, and step number two, we said, is being able also to be positive, like that blood type. Step number three is to be able to let go of any grudges, of any baggages of the past. And step number four is stepping into your mission, stepping into your purpose of life, actualizing it, living by it, day by day, night by night. And that's symbolized by the splitting of the Red Sea. As explained here by Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, I think it's a powerful statement, but what the splitting of the Red Sea really represents is as follows. Our personality also has two layers, our sea and our land. What we know of ourselves, our visible strengths, our tested talents, and our known abilities, the elements of our character that we are aware of, these comprise the dry land of our personality. But below the surface of our character lies a vast sea of latent talents, inner strengths, and untapped abilities that maybe we never knew we had. In the depth of our soul lies a reserve of dormant energy waiting to be discovered. This is our sea. And even we ourselves are unaware of what lies there. At the very birth of our nation, we needed to learn our mission, to split the sea and bring out the latent potential of ourselves and all of humanity. What the Lubavitcher Rebbe is saying is that the splitting of the Red Sea really represents the splitting of the Red Sea within ourselves. We can't be fully free, even though we may have achieved those three first steps, but we can't be fully free if we don't split our own seas, if we don't go deep inside and say to ourselves, what are the talents that God gave us? What is that dormant energy that maybe we never knew we had? All we know about ourselves maybe is our land, what can be seen. But what about our sea? Our sea has to be split. Once we learn to split our sea and to discover that which we truly are, and that calling that we each have, uniquely have, then we'll be able to be fully free. You can only be fully free again if you can actualize yourself and your mission in life. We each have a different mission. We each have a different purpose. That purpose is, I think, marked by the pop theory that we spoke about quite often, but by knowing what our talents are, what the opportunities that we are given each and every day, what people are that we have to impact. And by knowing the places that we visit are not just there randomly. We're not just visiting them randomly for vacation or to fill up gas if it's a gas station, but they are there really to make our purpose be fulfilled, and become God's ambassadors to those places, to those people, and to the world altogether. I want to conclude just with honoring one of the great luminaries of our community here in the greater Phoenix area. And I know many of you knew him, but just this past Shabbat afternoon, Nathan Efyun, lovingly known by Zaidi, was loved by so many, and they called him Zaidi. In our community, passed away. His funeral was this Sunday, and the family, I know many of you know Hilton, one of his three sons, sitting Shiva until Friday morning. And everyone is welcome, by the way, to visit them. But it's amazing to me that his name was Nathan. In Hebrew, Nathan means to give. And that was Nathan. Beyond all of his other qualities, the man gave and gave and gave. No matter who he was, no matter where he was, no matter what mood he felt he was in, no matter, again, the person he was speaking to, he gave and gave and gave. I'm sure many of you felt it, those who were blessed enough to know him. And many stories are coming out now during the Shiva, but how he would befriend the cashier at Fry's. And when he wasn't there, the person who was there in his stead was asked, "Where is Nathan?" You know, as if it was, as if Nathan was her best friend. Where's Nathan? Because he befriended anyone. Whenever you saw him, he always had a smile, always made you feel like the most important person in the world, and always gave his all to you, again, regardless of who you were. This was a man who understood that he's on a mission. He's not living life for himself. He's living life for that which is greater than himself, for God and for the purpose that God implanted in him. He was a Natan, he was a giver, Natan meaning giving, and that's what he did all the time. And last night at Shiva, I recalled the story of Saul Teichman, which I think is the story of Nathan himself. And it's a story that I want to conclude with, because very often we're so immersed in ourselves, and I understand why. I mean, yeah, many of us have troubles, but being immersed in ourselves can take us away from what our purpose is, from splitting our own seas and actualizing our deeper self and becoming God's ambassadors of light and kindness to the world. So the story of Saul Teichman is the story of a Holocaust survivor who became one of the great pillars of the Los Angeles community. He was a big philanthropist who gave to so many good causes. And his name is on many, many, many good institutions, etc. in Los Angeles. But Saul Teichman tells the story of how he was born in Munkach in 1927. When he came to Auschwitz, it was 1943. He was 16 years old. And as he was standing in that line at the entrance of Auschwitz, there was a man who all of a sudden appeared to him and said to him, "Excuse me, what's your name?" He said, "My name is Saul." He said, "How old are you?" "I'm 16 years old. I was born in 1927. The man looks at Saul and says to him, "No, you were not born in 1927. You were born in 1925. He says, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, "Yes, I was at your birth. I know you. You were born in 1925. That information is incorrect. So let's start this again. What's your name?" "So, when were you born?" Saul says, 1925. "Fine, leave me alone." The man disappears. The line continues on, and all of a sudden, Saul is facing the angel of death, Dr. Mengele. Yimach Shemo, may his name be erased. Dr. Mengele turns to Saul and says to him, "What year were you born?" Saul now understands, connects the dots, and says, "I was born in 1925. Dr. Mengele says, "Then go to the right." Right meant life. Left meant death. Saul understood that by saying that he was born in 1925, thanks to this man, he never met again in life, he was saved. If he had said his real age, he would have gone to the left and would have been killed. And that's why he became such a big philanthropist, such a big giver, because he learned from this man who, in spite of the circumstances he was in, many of the people could have very well be immersed in their own self-depression. I mean, I don't blame them. They were in Auschwitz at the entrance, and who knew what would happen? to them, whether they would live or they would die, literally. But here was a man who said, it doesn't matter what mood I'm in, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm still going to be God's ambassador of goodness to this world. And I'll actualize my deepest self, I'll split my sea and ensure that everything that I find in there is unleashed. That saved Saul Teichmann. By the way, that was Zaidi. Zaidi was a man who always gave, no matter where he was, how he felt, whether he was sick, not sick, whether he was depressed, not depressed. He gave and gave and gave. He split his sea each and every day. And that's the ultimate way of truly becoming free. So friends, just to summarize, step number one, again, is to own first and foremost who we are as Jews, as unique human beings with a unique mission. Friends, step number two is to say, be positive. To always look at the positive side, like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. Step number three is to let go of anything holding us back, including grudges and toxicities of the past. And step number four is to split our sea each and every day and understand that deep inside there is a calling, there is a purpose for which we live. And that purpose, generally speaking, beyond what we know individually about our own selves, is to become God's ambassadors of goodness and kindness, as instruments of light to the world, regardless of the state we're in, of the place we're in, of the emotions we're in, and allow that godliness to unleash itself and better the world.